Hello everyone and welcome to episode 52 of the NTS Podcast, and we're lucky to be joined today by the current NLC full open champion, Maxi, and the only one of those that's still actually in the NLC. So yeah, Maxi, how's it going?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys?
Yeah, we're all good, and kind of before we actually talk too much about the NLC, we do want to go maybe and look back at sort of a couple of different teams you've been on previously, maybe go back and do a bit of history and a couple of teams you played on I think are quite relevant to some things going on at the moment. And one thing on that topic especially was the time you spent in FlyQuest. So for those that don't know, you did actually spend roughly, was it sort of a year or so, or just slightly less?
Yeah. Was a year, 2 splits.
Yeah, so with FlyQuest Academy, you did have one game and a 100% win rate in the main team. I think it was it Santorin would have been their jungler at the time? I think he was ill.
Did you just steal my stat? That is shamely, that one. I searched for a good 5 minutes for that statistic.
Well, mine now. Stole your thunder, sorry, Tom. Obviously, one thing I think especially is why that's quite relevant at the moment is, of course, with the whole thing about the imports. Obviously, the owners trying to get the imports bans, import restrictions lifted, and some places trying to make up rubbish excuses that somehow it's going to help the NA players there. But yeah, just kind of in general, what was just your thoughts of actually playing in there just as a whole, really? Because you often hear for players that go over there, especially things like the ping being an issue, and just that the other players there aren't taking things as seriously. So what was your just sort of general experience to begin with of playing in NA?
I actually really enjoyed playing in NA. I like my teammates, I like the organization, everything. But the level of play in NA, especially Academy, is just incredibly low. I think it was really hard for me to improve as a player, even though I had Santorin as a good jungler and a kind of a mentor when I was there to talk to. I think the level is just not very high in Academy compared to ERLs.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the ping is a huge issue too. Because when you play on 60 ping and you play with players on 10 ping from the other coast, it's really unfair and makes the game even boring in a way, I think.
Yeah.
When you play with high ping.
Well, I think I remember seeing, I think it was might have been Bwippo or something in an interview once, just kind of giving the example of like, if you're just, even if it's like a certain champion you're playing and you're getting used to the mechanics, and just something as simple as like knowing when, like, kind of like feeling how quickly a skill shot goes out and knowing where you should be aiming it, guessing whether or not the player's going to juke it or something, and it's literally just completely irrelevant compared to when you're then on no ping or really low ping on obviously sort of tournament servers and stuff.
Also, another thing about the ping, you're scrimming on 8 ping, which is super low, and then you're playing solo queue on like 65 or whatever it is. It's You play 6 hours a day on 0 ping, and then 6 hours per day, or how many solo queue games you play on super high ping. So you can't really get used to any of the pings.
Yeah, it's obviously a big issue. But how did you actually end up joining a FlyQuest Academy as well? Because it's something I don't think like you really see that often. You see when EU players import, it's like like big LEC names that get paid shitloads of money to go over there. You don't really see often NA sort of look for sort of emerging talent or anything. So how did that actually come about in the first place?
So I just finished second EU Masters before I joined FlyQuest, and I was like super confident. I heard they were getting Santorin Santorin was TLCS jungler, who played for HGK, I believe, at that time, and had a really rough split. So I actually thought if I went there, I would have a real chance to play LCS main spot. But Santorin is so fucking good. Like, he is really, really good.
It's actually it's funny actually. Before you go on a little bit, it's funny how people kind of, you look at development and you don't really see it much of an NA with an EU player going into NA, except for Santorin. I think you're completely right. I think he looks so good and continually looks good as well. I think he's brilliant. He must be great to have like worked with as well, especially.
Yeah, I'm still talking to him about jungle and stuff. Like, he is really, really good. I really respect him. But basically, I went there because I thought I would have a higher chance of making it to LCS or LEC by going there. There's academies in EU at that time was not really a thing. I think some UK academy teams actually. I think Misfits and what was it?
I think that was the only one at the time. I
Yeah,
think it was before Excel got into the LEC or anything. Yeah.
Yeah, like ERLs were totally different back then. Well, they weren't even a proper like academy system. EU Masters was, while like it was still considered like a big thing, you could probably say like now EU Masters is considered like the gateway to LEC at this rate. You know, you have to kind of perform at that. It's like it's a completely different atmosphere like 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Yeah, it was.
Actually, one thing, just where you mentioned about that you'd had a good EU Masters before that. So that was with I've forgotten off the top of my head what team you were with. But I remember when I was sort of just...
Was it NIP? I think it was NIP.
Yeah. So I saw that the other day, and it kind of made me realise, because that was through the Nordic Championships as well. And I suppose maybe we didn't realise it at the time because it was still one of the first EU Masters. But sort of looking how the Nordic teams have gone now, and obviously still with the NLC, having a team not really anywhere near winning it, that was probably really impressive when you kind of think back to it. So do you think the Nordic leagues at that time were just a bit stronger, or was it just you were on a sort of a decent roster?
I think the import rules were a bit different back then in the ERL scene. Mm-hmm. So right now you have a lot of Scandinavian players around Europe, and they don't really count as an import anymore because they played, I think it's 2 splits in their league, and then I think basically that's it. So we were just like 5 from Scandinavia, super good players, and we made it work.
Okay. Yeah, just kind of a random thought while you mentioned it. Yeah. Just with the FlyQuest in there, so you said that in general you had a good time there. So is that something you would consider going back again, even if it was academy?
Not academy, unless there's a real chance of playing LCS. But when I went there, I felt like I could not improve. Like solo queue was bad, scrims were bad. Yeah, I just saw no improvement at all for me. That's why I had to go back. I actually signed 2 years, so I'm happy they let me go. When
I think it's interesting because it's like it's good that you kind of said like the organization itself, like good organization, like FlyQuest. You know, out of all like the LCS organizations, I actually look at FlyQuest as like quite a good organization to be a part of, anyway. But the fact of that not being able to like develop, I think, especially for a lot of young players, is very, very important, and especially if you want to kind of develop even more as a player, which kind of makes me worried about this import rule, because I don't think that the import rule is going to be like you're going to get like Korea or going to get China, you know, and going to kind of get all these superstars on teams. But there is like a worry of, and I don't know if you think that this could happen. That do you think ERLs could get affected by the import rule of kind of having like all of these kind of top ERL talents and kind of put them into an academy league instead?
I don't think players are going to play academy. I think when the ERL is like it is right now, there's no reason for an EU player to go academy unless there's like a serious chance of competing for main spot, right? So I don't see that affecting ERLs at all if they remove the rule.
That's fair enough. But yeah, after you played on FlyQuest, then you then had gone over to the TCL with Dark Passage. Just a couple of things on that. Just in general, I know it kind of sounds like it's a similar kind of thing, but just what was like the experience in the Turkish league? Because one thing that I don't know if it's maybe just like because you see the sort of the bigger sort of worse kind of headlines on Reddit and stuff, but the things often see come up with the Turkish league is things with different teams having payment issues. I think it was like Galatasaray or something was quite a big one, and yeah, 1 or 2 teams, you know, being a bit dodgy in some ways like that. So was there like any apprehension at all going there? I know you were on Dark Passage, and from what I remember, I'd never sort of heard anything like that coming from that org in particular. So was there any apprehension at all, or did it seem fine?
I just talked to players that have played for them before, and I made sure that everything was fine and all of this. But I didn't mean to go to TCL. It wasn't like, at first I wanted to take a split off and go bootcamp in Korea. I've done this like twice before. I wanted to go again, but COVID and all of this. And then they just asked if I wanted to play playoffs for them, and I didn't do anything that split, so I figured why not. They were second in the league already, and yeah. But I had no bad things happening on Dark Passage. It's a super good organization, even despite all the rumors about other teams and all of this.
That's cool. And how do you find sort of the general level playing in Turkey? Because one thing that you see as well quite a lot is ERL players sort of come and go from the TCL, and it's kind of sometimes I think it's a struggle to sort of try and pinpoint what kind of level it's at, because it is a Riot region still. They get a seed for Worlds, but then it kind of seems like sort of top end ERL players come in and out of there. So where roughly do you see the actual level of the league? Do you think it is sort of similar to sort of a higher end ERL, or kind of like a mix and match? Because obviously the top teams that go to Worlds usually don't look too bad as well, and you'd imagine they're better than ERL teams, but then it's kind of a bit of a weird mix.
So they changed players a lot in TCL in general. So it changed a lot from split to split, like what teams are good and how good they are. Sometimes TCL teams are better than all ERL teams, for sure. Like they're only scrimming LEC teams and they're super strong. Other times they're like not as good. And I think usually it's only a couple of teams that are good in TCL and the rest are nothing special, right?
I think it's really interesting with the TCL as well, because I call it like a very volatile league, like kind of similar to probably some ERLs as well in general, but like some splits, like you said, you can get some like really killer teams and some killer players which go in and come together and try and just, basically get a spot at Worlds, because I think obviously that Worlds placement is very, very important and a good goal for a lot of players who probably haven't maybe had a chance in LEC at that point. But then also times you just get a bit of, teams kind of coming together with that same reason, but don't gel well, and the quality of it kind of suffers as a result. It's actually a really interesting league, though. Like, obviously, apart from like drama aside, but I really enjoy kind of just watching the TCL, because sometimes apart from obviously, you kind of know which teams are genuinely going to win, because it's generally the teams which fun the most. But like, it's still interesting to kind of see all the other teams battle it out and see the quality ranging between the league. In one league itself, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a shame that it was, in the end, maybe a shame there's no MSI, because like you said, you joined in playoffs, and I think you came like 3rd/4th, so it was like not, a mile away from actually getting to an international event as well, which obviously didn't happen in the end anyway, but still. After that, then obviously you ended up with Riddle for the summer in the first NLC split. How did that roster kind of come about? Because we actually had Smeagol on for an episode at the beginning of that split. The way he'd explained it was that you guys had kind of sort of built the roster yourselves, and perhaps it might have been a case of like the roster sort of finding an org to back them up for the split. What was the thinking behind that? Was it just that you were just sort of a group of friends that wanted to play together, or was it actually, that you've maybe done some scrims and you knew you were a good team and wanted to work together somewhere for that?
So I think all of us have talked together about making a Danish team, like for a long time, just thinking it would be nice to speak Danish in comms and 5 Danes and all of this, and the synergy, everything. And it just was kind of lucky that we ended up together, I think, because we just talked during the off season and no one really had any super good offers, they thought. And that's it. We just made that team ourselves, basically.
And how tiring was that split? Because like I think everybody was kind of talking about how you played so many games that split. It was unfair at points, I felt.
Yeah. I remember we were playing NLC on a patch where Lily was disabled or something like that, and EU Masters Lily was enabled. So for me, I could not play this jungle. We had to ban it every game because of that. And I mean, if it wasn't a different patch, it would actually be fun, I think, to play this many games, because it didn't even feel like a competitive game anymore. It just felt like scrims, basically. We were so comfortable playing, right? Because we played, I can't even remember if it was 20 games or something like that in a week. It was crazy.
The day of the final was like...
We played a best of 3 and a best of 5 on the same day, I believe.
I think you ended up, because wasn't it 2-1 and then 3-1, so it was like 7 games in a row.
Yes.
Outright. And then like the next day basically was EU Masters. But
next day, playing EU Masters on a different patch, we play 3 different teams or something like that, and the day after we play 3 different teams again. Something crazy like that. I can't even remember the.
And then I think you had to play. Was it LDLC? I think because they didn't seed the playing groups, did they? They just kind of put all the teams and just randomly selected them, and it ended up being A and B were just stacked groups against each other. So because I believe you had, I think it was Gamer Legion you had in your team, and then you also had then face LDLC in the end. And I was like, oh my, like, give this team a rest. Like, they've gone through so much.
We had Gamer Legion, they finished second that EU Masters, I think, and we had LDLC, which they won the prior UM, but we still had like 3 chances to make it to main stage. So it's not really an excuse, but it was a lot of games.
And how good was it? Obviously now you're on an academy team, but how good was it to kind of go into the NLC and beat an academy team? Like everybody expects, you know, like everybody expects this split, you know, it's going to be XL and it's going to be Fnatic, and that's how the world should be. But how good was it to kind of, you know, beat one of the academy teams to get through?
I mean, it was just good to make EU Masters. I didn't really think about beating an academy team or anything. We already knew kind of that we were going to beat them before even going into the match because they didn't look too good, and their mid jungle synergy was really not very good compared to ours. So I felt really comfortable playing against them back then.
Fair enough. And one thing I did want to ask, cause, yeah, you mentioned there about how many ridiculous amounts of games you played in a row, and it basically felt like scrims. I wondered if you actually even scrimmed at that point, and what the process would be like. Yeah, because I would presume like there's literally no time for it, and it would probably just be a hindrance. But then, was there ever a point where anyone sort of had thought a new pick and they wanted to try something, and you just had to try it on stage or anything like that, or were you kind of pretty set in how you were going to play it through that run?
Can't really remember specifics about champs and stuff, but I'm pretty sure we did not scrim a single time on the new patch when we. So we just went into it. We saw some games and we tried to copy what they did. That made sense, or that didn't make sense, and yeah.
It's crazy. Just in that split as well, because kind of going back to the actual NLC, I remember like sort of seeing the roster on paper. Everyone kind of thought it was going to be a decent side, and then I think it was like the first or second week you beat XL, and everyone was kind of blown away really. And even though, like I say, you were kind of expected to be quite high up. And I think you lost to Godsent like the game after or something like that.
Yeah. And
the first few weeks kind of had that sort of feel to it, where you'd like win a game and then lose a game we probably should have won. Do you want to just maybe talk us through that? Was there any sort of reason behind that? Because from outsiders looking in, it maybe even looked like it was sort of overconfidence, maybe just being a bit cocky against some of the lower down teams, and then sort of slipping up a couple of losses for that. Do you think it was something like that, or was there any other reason to those?
I think so we were kind of in a slump in the middle of the regular split, and we probably also disrespected some of the teams a bit. We didn't put as much effort into preparation and stuff like that. Also, I think best of ones in regular split, you see on this team too, we're losing games we shouldn't lose. It happens. It doesn't really mean too much in the end, as long as you make it to playoffs, right? But we had Trashy coming in, or Cold as he goes by now, who helped us coach, who helped Smeagol and the team, and it improved us a lot. I think his help was very needed, and yeah.
How good was that to have him just specifically for you as well? You know, given obviously the position, did kind of similar to like Santorin? Did it kind of help you kind of learn new things and stuff like that? Because it's a good acquisition to bring someone in at that point.
Extremely helpful for me, and he's Danish too, and he would really look at my pathing, and he would tell me when I did stuff wrong that I'm not too used to by coaches, because they don't really play jungle themselves. They can't really go into specific and go super deep in details about jungle pathing and matchups and all of this. So it was super helpful for me. I'm really happy he helped us.
Well, you've not done bad for like kind of like jungling mentors, if you like. Obviously, like playing with Santorin. Yes. Then having Cole the coach, now obviously self-made, but we'll kind of get onto that a bit more in a little while. Only other thing to touch on before we move on to Fnatic Rising was obviously the full open that happened after that split, which obviously just sort of a bit of a smaller tournament, just something to kind of finish off the year, which you guys, as the same roster, then moved over to Barrage. And from what we were told, it was sort of a case of they were sort of the only ones that even inquired about you guys, and kind of that's how they ended up picking up the roster. But was there how did that happen? Had you decided that you were going to go into that and were looking for a team, or was it that Barrage just sort of tried their luck and you thought maybe you just play the tournament, see how it goes?
So I'm not entirely sure how it went down. I think Riddle had like a team in the Telenor Liga or whatever it's called, so we couldn't play for them anymore, and so we had to find another team. And we didn't even know there was this tournament. They just announced it a few weeks after the split.
Yes, it was very short notice. I think a lot of people were talking about that because some people had rosters, and I believe that even like some players had kind of said that they would have kind of even like joined it if they had knew about it, but obviously new roster had already been created. Like I said, I believe that you're right with Riddle. I think Riddle decided to use their Telia roster because they basically had already got the roster itself, so they were like, we might as well use the roster which we've already got. So very last minute, but it's good to. I was going to make the joke, Lee. I was going to be like, well, how could you coexist with a brand new team in Barrage, given the fact that it was the exact same team? But how kind of was it? Was it just? Did you all just decide to do it, or was it like
we like it was during the off season, so we didn't really want to put too much work into it, but we figured why not just play? We didn't. So the thing is, during off season, you don't want to underperform a lot. It's a bad look for other teams, right? So it was like we put some work into it, but it wasn't 100% basically, and we ended up winning it. So.
And then you're like, oh, Fnatic XL aren't it? Oh, of course we'll go with it.
Well, yeah, because obviously being the team that had gotten to the Masters and everything, you know, and obviously when all the tier lists and everything came out, you guys were like clearly the favourites to win it. Was there any part of you that maybe thought it was a bit harder than you'd expected, or was it pretty much just as easy as you thought? Because the team obviously you played in the final was Envision, who were a UK sort of second division team. I think everyone was kind of surprised with how well they'd done, and I think they even took
They built a good team though. They proper tried it. Like it's not the team which they've got now. Obviously, I like Envision, but it's not the team they've got now in the UKLC. Like they proper built around like a team to try and win that. You had to play spoiler to them, Maxi. That's what you had to do.
So was there any sort of surprises like that? Teams that were harder than you thought?
I think it kind of went as expected. We knew that the academy teams were not joining. I think we lost one game in finals though. So it was just like Riddle regular split basically. we were losing some games we shouldn't lose, but we ended up winning anyway.
Fair enough.
There's no really surprises, I feel like.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And it's a trophy to add on Gamepedia, isn't it? You know, you go to your tournament bio. It's like that's the first of that. You blink twice, it says NLC. So
it was the first thing I've ever won actually on my my NLC or just on my career in general actually, other than lands.
Well, there you go. They all count. But yeah, after that, obviously that was the off season heading into 2021, and obviously a certain well-known Twitter leaker, LEC Wulu, had seemed pretty confident about where you were going to end up, and obviously it wasn't with Fnatic Rising. So at first there was these rumors about you joining Corp in the NFL with, I think the only other name was Maxi and maybe Saken at the time. They said about. I don't know if that's something you can talk about too much, but was there any sort of talks there? Was that a team you almost ended up joining? And
it was pretty close. I was joining that team actually, very, very close.
So then what happened then? Was it, because obviously that was a decent roster. I think they're even top in the NFL right now. So did Fnatic maybe contact afterwards, and then you thought, well, I'd rather go there, or did they sort of change their mind, or what happened with that?
So I was talking to Fnatic even before Corp, but it was a different roster and a different way of going through. So I didn't find that offer too interesting. And then a few days before I had to decide where I wanted to go, they just came up with this new roster and new idea and all of this, and I decided to go with that instead.
That new roster features someone called FEBIVEN. What's it like? It's like, oh yeah, by the way, Max, we've got FEBIVEN in the mid lane. Fancy it, like. Yeah.
It's just a crazy good roster here, so I couldn't really say no to that. But I was very close to joining Corp, yeah.
No, fair enough. And to be fair, like I say, they've looked good so far, so I think you were spoiled for choice if you like them.
I mean, let's be honest, it's basically what Fnatic Rising was with Xmati and Targamas, isn't it? So it's very much joining like pre-Fnatic Rising or post-Fnatic Rising at that point.
Exactly. But yeah, we say about with for FEBIVEN being on the roster as well. So, what is kind of his role? Does he have any sort of more sort of leadership role, anything behind the scenes? Obviously, he's like the big veteran player that has got a huge amount of experience in LEC and LCS. So does he is there anything like that in sort of in the background where he's like sort of takes on any kind of like being like a team captain sort of thing, or is it just sort of doing his job like the rest of us or the rest of you guys, obviously?
I think he's mostly just doing his job. When it comes to reviews and stuff, he has very strong points and shows leadership and all of this. But in game, I think me and Rooks are mostly leading the team. Yeah.
Oh, that's fair enough. I think sort of jungle support is
it's just our roles, right? It fits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. And yeah, sort of going into the split itself then, and like you said earlier about how it's sort of mostly going to plan. Obviously, you had the odd game here and there, and I suppose the first one you can maybe write that off a little bit, where you had the Pride that couldn't play in the first week. What was that like? Did you guys know with much sort of time in advance, or was it just sort of quite a sudden thing?
I think we played 2 sets of scrims with Lind instead of Pride, and the meta was kind of weird. Like you needed 80 tops. It was the Gore Drinker meta. And Lind is an AD carry main. He cannot play Aatrox and
he's also like incredibly young, isn't he, as well?
Yes.
So it's like, imagine you're playing top lane.
But he even did find it was more for draft. It was super hard to draft because I wanted to play AP junglers with 80 top, an AP mid, that was the meta. But I had to first pick Graves or something like that because we didn't have any AD junglers if they ban Olaf. So it was really hard to draft. But it was 2 games and we won one of them. So
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna give you a pass for the Barrage game. However, how did you lose to Riddle on the last day? Like, because this could have been the unofficial undefeated asterisk with with the sub top laner. But was it just one of those days with the Riddle game? Because it was it the last? I think it was one of the last days of the season as well, wasn't
Second
it?
last,
yeah.
We were like 5k up in 10 minutes. That game was extremely easy for us to win, but we managed to fuck up some team fights, and they had a Samira. Yeah, she just took over completely. There's not much else in that game. I felt like we were in the lead for most of it, and then we just played bad mechanically in a lot of fights, and they just ran us over then.
Get those losses out right now, just before play-ins, obviously, just before playoffs. I mean,
exactly.
Make sure to get them out of the way. I couldn't believe it. I was like, Fnatic have dominated. This is brilliant. And I'm like, wait, Riddle are winning. I was like, what's happening?
I think it's even the game where we have been the most ahead in the shortest amount of time, and then we end up losing it. It's just it happens.
I mean, it had to be a former team which you lost to as well, Max. Out of all of them, so you had to give Riddle something, Yeah,
never mind. Was there any game then in the regular season that was kind of the opposite, one where obviously you won most games anyway, but was there any game that stands out as one that you thought was especially clean and you guys were quite proud of how you played?
Or clean? I think there's one game that was the opposite of clean. The Barrage game, I think it was, where we should not have won that game.
The second one,
Yes.
Yeah, the second one.
But most of the rest of the games were pretty fine. The teams are super scared of us, honestly. So we just end up taking everything, and there's not really anything going on. We just get all objectives. We just slowly end the game.
Yeah.
I want to just have a little chat about like the groups in general. Obviously, you haven't been able to obviously play anybody in Group A, but I'm guessing you've probably watched like a little bit, especially closer to coming like to playoffs and stuff like that. Which would you consider your group kind of like the harder of the two groups? Because I think there's been a lot of debate on kind of which people have found like the most competitive out of the lot. Because I look at kind of Group B and I look at Team Singularity, Barrage, and yourselves. There's like 3 of probably the 4 top teams in the actual group in the NLC itself. So it's like I just wanted to see what your opinion on that. Do you think that that's kind of correct to say, given how well those 3 teams have done?
I don't think I've watched too much Group A, to be honest. I'm not sure how good the teams are there, but I think Group B is the top 2 and 3, they're much better than Group A top 2 and 3. It looks like by the standings only. Like I've not watched a lot of Group A games, but I just assume that Group B is a bit better. Maybe the average in Group A is a bit better, but the top end on Group B is higher.
So there's sort of anyone you'd been looking out for in A that you'd hope to get? Obviously, or even with Excel, have you guys sort of had any thoughts of where you line up against them at the moment and which one's slightly stronger? So I think it is kind of interesting with this kind of format, because obviously you are the two academy teams, the ones expected to be the best, and then we don't obviously see you actually against each other really until the playoffs. So it's kind of an interesting topic of which team is actually better at the moment.
I'm not really a fan of these groups, to be honest. I think I don't like the system too much. It's so hard to compare each other when it's like two different leagues, right? And I have no idea how good Excel are. We didn't scrim them. I didn't see a lot of their games. Obviously, I'll start watching when it gets closer, if we're gonna play them in finals and all of this. But I'm not sure, to be honest.
I think it's interesting as well, because like it was very similar. I felt like last split, like we kind of came into like predispositions of like, oh right, well the academy teams are clearly going to be like better, and then kind of even the bottom tier like teams who finished like fourth in one of the groups was doing better than some of the teams which like finished second and third, you know. So it's like, even when you look at the standings, and I think it's so easy to kind of look at standings and be like, well, then Tricked and Barrage could be similar, but actually, you know, Tricked could be the fourth best team, or Barrage could be the fourth best team, you know, at that point. So it adds some intrigue going in, but I'm guessing probably as like a team and as a player like yourself, you would like to kind of at least gauge that ability, at least on a competitive stage, at least once a split.
Yeah.
Okay. And sort of as we go into playoffs, there's obviously been sort of fair few changes around the jungle. I think in the last patch with the, well, I'm not sure if it's the one that's gone out yet, or the one with the XP changes.
XP and gold,
Yeah, is that something? Or what are your kind of thoughts on that? Do you think that's going to see a pretty big sort of meta shift? Because one thing, especially with changes as big as that, the playoffs seems, or like right before all the leagues start heading into playoffs, seems like a bit of an awkward time to do something like that. So has that kind of affected you guys' preparation at all, or you know what you're playing?
I was a bit worried at first because it's jungle nerf. I don't like that, but it turns out that nothing changed. Basically, it's just you're gonna be half a level down when you're level 9 before. You're gonna be 8.5 now. You're gonna lose some gold. You have a lot more awkward recalls, but other than that, it's same champs, same jungle style. Obviously, tanks got indirectly buffed because they don't really need levels as much as carries do, but it's not a problem. It's basically the same.
I was looking at like, especially like competitively, because everyone was talking about the jungle nerfs, and I'm like, right, we're just gonna see Sejuani every game essentially. You know, is that the meta which we're going in? But really, it just seems the exact same type of champions which are being played by like a couple. And then also, I think what it does add though is it adds the possibility of playing kind of with a tank jungler or more of an enabler jungler, a ganking jungler. So really, it kind of benefits for me, kind of, you know, teams which have that synergy and kind of have that champ pool, just the ability to kind of do that way. But for me, I'm looking at, you know, still like aggressive farming junglers, and you know, you look at the likes of Lilia still kind of being played, you know, and Olaf still being played as well. Yeah, so it's like it's very similar to what we've been seeing prior.
Yeah, you basically just have to farm a lot. Still, that's the meta. So all champs that have fast clear are gonna be good. Some tanks have fast clear; they can be played. We see Skarner a lot more too into Graves and Lilia, stuff like that. But this patch didn't do too much. I think that was even playable before.
So first game in playoffs, you're gonna lock in Zach, yeah? Is that...
Well, one thing on that as well, there was a tweet from a couple of days ago that did the rounds from Leader about how if like a mid laner gets solo killed, then their team actually gets advantage because their jungler can come and catch the farm and gets like extra XP off it.
I saw it on the LEC literally like today, and it kind of put shivers down my spine seeing it.
Yeah, is that something? Is any truth to that, or do you think that's maybe a bit of an exaggeration?
It depends on the wave. If it's a big wave, then yeah, I guess it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, poor MagiFelix didn't even teleport. He just literally went to mid lane knowing that his junglers just took the entire wave from him.
Well, never mind. So kind of looking, if we sort of look more towards playoffs themselves, obviously the first team you guys are up against, I think, is Tricked from Group A. I presume you guys would have sort of started your prep for that by now. Have you sort of seen much of Tricked, and yeah, what do you kind of think of them, and how do you think that matchup would go?
We didn't do too much team prep against that, but we've watched like their games individually, and I've seen a bit. I'm not too worried about playing them at all.
Mm-hmm. To be fair, out of them and Nordavind, who were kind of tied for that second place, Nordavind were Tricked were probably the ones that were a bit more on a downturn the last few weeks anyway. So it might be better to even be playing them now rather than Nordavind, who actually got the higher seed in the end.
But I do have to talk about the tiebreaker game itself, and it's like, and I don't know, because like some of the other tiebreakers were very like tense but bloody, and I love like bloody games, and stuff like that, a lot of kills, and this one just felt a bit like it felt controlled by Tricked, and I understood why they did what they did, but I just don't like when League of Legends play when you have like just over 10 kills in an entire game from both teams. I just don't like it myself, but I understand why they played it. They played kind of good objectively. Nordavind kind of just never got off the races, but I think it was interesting to kind of see both of those teams, compete that way, especially when you got the likes of like Kerberos, who's like such an aggressive top laner, kind of not even get off for Nordavind at all. And obviously a lot of people, when we did our unofficial team of the split for the NLC, we're talking about Chrisberg, and again, like he was another one who didn't really do much in that one, which is unfortunate.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And yeah, on the topic of that, obviously we saw Barrage beat Singularity for the one in your group. Is that one you saw come in? Because those two sides have been pretty sort of neck and neck in terms of level. They both had decent games. They've both also had sort of weird off games as well. Which of those two sides do you see as being stronger at the moment?
I think they're pretty close in level, Singularity and Barrage. I didn't really watch the tiebreaker, to be honest, so I didn't see how that went off, but I think they're pretty close, yeah.
The way that, if I had to explain the tiebreaker, it would be Barrage will win in, very much winning, and then I think just basically Singularity just team fighted them and won right at the end, essentially, like close to the end. It was, but like for me though, that kind of simplifies kind of what Barrage's faults most of the time have been when they've actually done really good early, really good mid, and then kind of it comes to kind of finishing off a game, and whether it be like misexecution on team fights or anything like that seems to lose them the game like slightly after that, which I'm kind of seeing a little bit more. Like there's been a couple of games now, a couple of their losses have basically been that, and obviously the tiebreaker loss. Sorry, not the tiebreaker loss, but in this game, they actually turned that around in the sense that, they, kind of lost in the early game, but then won outright at the end. So it was kind of nice seeing that change from them.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I think Singularity against us, they are super passive early game, and then they just fight later on. Just as you said, they're good at team fighting, I guess. And Barrage they're a bit more aggressive. They're not too scared to fight compared to other teams in our group.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And yeah, just while we're on the topic of those last few games, we won't go on it too much, especially if you haven't seen them. But yeah, obviously the other one was the relegation series as well between Eminem and Dusty. Dusty pretty convincingly won 2-0, which I don't think was a huge surprise. And yeah, I'm kind of saying a bit about it off air before, but it is a bit sad to see how much Eminem is struggling really. And yeah, we're not really looking forward to seeing them against some of the sort of top Tilia Masters teams. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. I think they can make roster changes from what I'd heard, so I wonder if they would do something before that and yeah, maybe sort of turn things around. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see, I suppose.
Yeah, I think this was kind of cut and dry. I think while I think that Group B was kind of better top half, I think the bottom half of Group A was really, really strong. And the fact that Dusty kind of finished bottom, for me, they weren't the worst team in the NLC at all. So I can kind of see why they the first game was a little bit bloody, but they eventually kind of got there in the end. But the second game they dominated, and I actually do worry for probably maybe both M&M and Dust, because you've got the likes of Resolve. Resolve potentially. Obviously, the UKLC has not finished its playoffs, so that we don't know what might happen there. But Absolved as well, kind of going into Telemasters as well. And I do kind of want to just briefly kind of transition that kind of onto the fact that we have 2 new teams going into playoffs, and they were the 2 teams who have kind of basically weren't meant to be in the NLC, in Covert and Granite. Granite kind of finished 4th. They beat Godsent. Godsent last year were the unsurprising underdogs. Granite now have took that mantle of unsurprising underdogs themselves, and it's kind of mad to see kind of 2 teams who, like you said, like I believe that when we had Granite on, I think the coach said that they had like a week, 2 weeks before they even knew that they were going into the NLC, to now finish into playoffs alongside Cova. It's quite impressive. I don't think they're going to go any further than that, but if they've made it into playoffs, anything could happen.
Exactly.
I actually think Cova is not that bad. I think they're playing pretty well as a team, even though I haven't really heard of their players before. I haven't played them before, but they're playing good as a team, Cova. I'm sure they're going to beat every team in Group A, even Excel.
Well, we'll see then. We'll do some predictions in a minute, and you can see if you stick to it then. Actually, in that case, we may as well move on to those now. So we do some weekly predictions here on the NTS podcast. So we'll at least go through the games that are possible to predict. Obviously, some of the games next week depend on who wins what, but we'll at least get through some of the first ones. And the first game of the week is Excel against Barrage. Now, it might be a bit tricky for you to predict then, Maxi, if you haven't really watched much of that group. I don't know if you would have scrimmed against Barrage at all either, but yeah, any ideas what the strength is like, enough to make any sort of prediction? Or are you just going to...
It's a 2-1 for Excel. 2-1 for Excel, I think.
Cool. Let me just make a note of that. What do you reckon, Tom?
See, I think this is very interesting, because it's like... This is for me the upset tie. This is the tie which there actually could be an upset from. BTXL look very good in their group. I don't think there's any denying that. They clearly were the best team in that group. But then also, like, I've looked at Barrage, and I feel like if Barrage can kind of, sort out kind of the, late game problems, which they kind of sorted out in the times, but that's like one game. But if they can kind of sort out that and be a little bit more consistent, the one thing that I felt has been missing for BT is the fact that they seem to not do particularly great in the early game to an academy standard anyway. And then it seems to be the mistakes of the other team, which then BTXL kind of take from that and then snowball that. That once a mistake has occurred, like BT don't let the other team get another chance in. I don't know if that will kind of happen with Barrage, because I actually think Barrage are quite solid in the early game itself. But so I'm gonna go for a 2-1 Barrage. I'm actually gonna go for the fact that I think Barrage are gonna beat XL. Plus, let's be honest, no flame, but XL just don't do well in playoffs anymore. They just don't. They didn't even make finals last year. But I don't know. Like, I feel like while I feel like the result could still be a BT Fnatic finals still this year, that doesn't mean that BT have to win kind of every series, and this could be one of those series where they potentially don't win.
Yeah, I think Barrage, when we play them, they're not really scared of us, even though we're in academy teams, and most teams are, to be fair. So maybe they will surprise XL if they're not used to being playing against that. Yeah,
and I think, like you said, like the fact that you can obviously some teams like scrim against each other, but I don't think that the academy teams kind of scrim against that many of the other NLC teams anyway. But I think that the fact that BT hasn't faced Barrage in like a competitive game, and kind of all you're seeing is what you're seeing from basically what everybody else is seeing, essentially, that could be kind of detrimental to BTXL. I don't think that's as detrimental to Barrage, who, like you said, have been this team who are just willing to kind of go for it. There's no like fear factor for them.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I've gone for a 2-0 XL. I take your points on board, Tom. And if
you just better slap them down. That's it.
Well, they should at least make it a bit more interesting. But yeah, I don't know. For me, I think BT do look probably too strong. And maybe if it was a best of 5, I might have given one game to Barrage and maybe said 3-1. But I don't know. In best of 3s, if I have to go a bit more one way, I'd probably go for a 2-0. I wouldn't be too surprised to see Barrage pick up a game. I would be very surprised, I think, to see them win the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I'll keep it.
I don't think they're going to win the whole thing.
Don't
put that in my mouth. I didn't say that. I said they win this game. I didn't say they win the whole thing. But if they do, clip this. I think Barrage are going to win the whole thing. Yeah, okay. Exactly.
And just clip that 1 3-second part. We can do that for every team then, Tom, and then you're covered on all bases. The one after that then is yourselves, Fnatic Rising against Tricked. Anyone go for Tricked? Any takers or what is that a clean 2-0 for you guys, Maxi?
Yeah, of course, 2-0.
Yeah, you know what, and it's not just because Maxi's on. I do genuinely think that, like, while Tricked won the tiebreaker, I do feel actually like the Nordavind matchup would have been maybe the one I would have predicted like a 2-1 on. Because I find the skill level and the potential skill level of Nordavind kind of higher, like their ceiling compared to Tricked. But I don't think Tricked have particularly looked great. Obviously, besides like the tiebreaker, I think they lost like 4 in a row, which is like quite a bad amount. They were very much competing with XL and then kind of dropped off a cliff essentially. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's because they confirmed playoffs really early. We don't know, but like, it's a 2-0 surely.
I'll keep things interesting then. I'm not gonna say you guys are gonna lose. I'm not that brave. But I'll go for a 2-1 then, just to at least kind of keep things going.
Lee, what's the point situation anyway? Because we're
I came prepared this time, so you always ask me that and you always catch me off guard. I am still just about in the lead. So Maxi, we've been tallying these up with our guests all sort of tallied up together. And it's really close. So I'm in the lead with 38 correct games so far. Tom, you're second with 37. And then our guests are third with 36. So it's all neck and neck. And I forget exactly how we scored it last year or last split.
It's 1 point if we get the correct victory, it's 1 point. But if we get the victory and the score, it's 3. So
there we go. So it's all to play for in playoffs. So we'll see how it goes. So I'll go through.
I've guessed won every single time we've done this. I think so.
I'm not sure. They did last time, so the pressure's on Maxi. You've got to get those points back up for him. I'll go for a 2-1 then. I don't know, just to keep it different. I'm winning, so I've got a little 1 point breathing room. But the next game after that then, and these ones might be a bit more tricky to predict, especially like we say, if we haven't seen all the games on all sides. But we've got Nordavind against Kova, which I would have given fairly easy to Nordavind. I'd put down 2-1, just because Nordavind has still looked a bit shaky and have looked quite inconsistent. So I wouldn't really see them beating any team 2-0, to be honest. But then you say, Maxi, that Kova have looked pretty good, considering you didn't know too much about them. So would you see any? Well, actually, you did just say that they beat every team in Group A. So surely you're going to go for a win.
So they'll beat, They're gonna win 2-1. Even though I haven't watched a lot of Nordavind's games.
Fair enough.
I think with it's very much the team of like Kova's kind of a known entity. I think at this point you kind of know what level of play you're going to get from Kova, and it is a good level again to make it into playoffs. Is impressive, anyway. Where I feel like Nordavind is kind of this team which. A little bit kind of like last season where I feel like they were on like the cusp of kind of being what I expected them to be, but they've not quite reached that yet. And last time, obviously, they didn't perform very well in playoffs as well. I am going to edge it to Nordavind. I'm going to give it... Well, I'm not going to edge it. I'm going to give it a 2-0, but I'm not going to give it in the way of like... I feel like when you give a 2-0, you expect like a domination and a stomp. But I do think it's actually going to be close games, but I am betting on the fact that I think that hopefully Nordavind have kind of reached a little bit more of the ceiling, which I expect them to kind of have.
Yeah, definitely.
Plus the Chrisberg fan army will go after us because we did put him in the team of the split. So
yeah, it was quite relentless. But I think it was even by Prosfair, who was in my team, and even he was upset about it. Never mind. The last game then, that at least we can predict for now, out of the games that are actually we know the lineups, is Singularity against Granite. Which it's a bit of a tricky one, I think, because like we said, maybe Singularity are have been fairly consistent. I think they've had maybe a couple of off games, as did Barrage, and that's why I think they were sort of roughly in the same place. But then Granite were one that started off pretty strong and then literally fell off a cliff for most of the regular season up until
they fell off
a
cliff, but they held on with like a finger and have climbed themselves back up slowly.
Yeah, it's basically spent until the last week doing that, and the last week they then obviously picked up the win that they needed to get to tiebreakers, and then won the tiebreaker against Godsent. So now they're in playoffs. Are they getting through in playoffs? Do we think? I'm not expecting them to get through. I've gone for 2-1 Singularity, but it's tricky because Granite at first we kind of had the idea, and that's obviously where they lost all the games, that if you ban Victor and Rise they just lose, which is basically what happened for a few weeks. And then they've got a couple of wins now, not on Victor and Rise, so they've at least shown that they've kind of progressed from that, and can't just be sort of so easily banned out. So I don't know. That's why I've gone 2-1, because I could see them pulling out some sort of madness, or at least one game, and get one little upset. But then I don't think I'd seen enough for them to actually win a series against Singularity, to be fair.
I'm gonna go for a 2-0 Singularity. I feel like I love Granite getting into playoffs and kind of showing people up, because a lot of people put them as categorically the worst team in the NLC.
A lot of people, like who, Tom, did that?
I don't know. you definitely put that. I might have put them down there as well, maybe. But like a lot of people kind of said that this team, a lot of people didn't really know anything about them and kind of expected, because it was basically going to be their roster, they were going to compete in Telia Masters, that this was not going to be like a competitive team. They've made it into playoffs, and I think that is a great achievement for kind of the organization as a whole to kind of overachieve like that. But for me, Team Singularity look like a very solid team, and I can't see them beating them. I genuinely can't. It's unfortunate, really.
Maxi, seen much of either of those? Seen much of Granite?
I'll just go for a 2-0 Singularity then. Hearing what you guys said, I didn't watch Granite play at all, but I don't think Singularity is that bad. I think they're not good early game, but if Granite is not a good team, they're not gonna be able to do anything to them early.
Fair enough. That'll do for those then.
So Maxi, I'm gonna just throw this out there. Are you winning the playoffs? I'm guessing that's what's gonna happen. Yeah, exactly.
I think we're super stable now, and we figured out this patch already. I'm pretty confident in this playoffs.
Have you guys sort of started planning ahead towards EU Masters yet, or is that still a bit early?
No, it's too early. I don't even know if the data is out yet for EU Masters or the patch or anything. Mm-hmm. So we're just focusing on playoffs for now.
Mm-hmm. And so is there, even maybe not sort of going into exactly VOD reviews or anything to that level, but is there any teams sort of you scrimmed against from the other leagues that are looking pretty strong, that you'll see sort of potentially matching up against?
I think this split, there's like 10 teams that could win the EU Masters. It's really hard to tell how good teams are. Mm-hmm. Also, just judging scrims, you can't really just judge from scrims. People play so different in real games anyway. True. I'm not really sure. I think Vitality are good. I think BDS are good. I think Rogue Academy is good. Misfits Academy, there's so many teams.
I think it's crazy. I think especially like the LFL, like, and kind of how the LFL has kind of come up. Like, you actually look at that league now, and I look at those teams involved, I'm like, a lot of them are contenders for EU Masters, and there's not been many leagues which I would consider where I've been like, there's like 4 or 5 teams who could compete at EU Masters in that league, and it's good to see, but then also, let's not discount, like the Prime League, and in even NLC, like I think, even you would kind of consider this as well, Maxi, like both yourselves and both kind of BTXL have built teams, with probably the ambition of winning EU Masters. I think that's been the organization's ambition for a while, and I think that's why these changes were made.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mouse also from Prime League. I didn't mention them. Really good. Who else? K-Corp. There's too many good teams.
Just insert LFL team.
They could be better probably with maybe one change. Could have seen them be better though in the jungle.
Yes.
But funny that when Tom mentions about obviously that Fnatic and XL both made kind of quite big changes to the academy size for this year, probably with that purpose. With Fnatic, one thing that even sort of going to last split, or sort of more in the last couple of splits than this one, I think, but there'd been sort of quite a negative feel, I think, around Pride in the top lane, and it was especially when it was him and Targamas, people often sort of highlighted as maybe the two players that didn't belong on Fnatic, maybe weren't good enough to be on there. Pride's obviously still on the roster, and from what I've seen, I think does really well and looks like one of the best top laners in the league and doesn't look out of place on the academies at all. Is that something you've sort of seen, the people sort of talking like that, even when we were talking sort of before last split? And how has it been playing with Pride in the top lane?
Well, I think last split, when I played versus Pride, I felt like he was a good top laner. I didn't feel like he was bad at all. I don't know what people say about him.
This was
UKLC, yeah.
It was actually before the NLC summer. It was basically the week before it started. We had Smeagol on, and he basically called out Pride, saying that he was terrible. So that's kind of why I wanted to ask you.
I feel like he played good against us in finals, though. So I don't know. I'm happy to have him as my top laner. Yeah. I don't have anything bad against him.
I think he's definitely developed. I think especially like when the NLC became the NLC, I think that was when Pride really kind of showed up and stepped up and actually and obviously when we had Smeagol on, this was before obviously even the NLC kind of like fully kind of got into play and got into its motions and stuff. But to see kind of the development of kind of him, I think as a player, I think is really good to see and really nice. And it's good to see kind of Fnatic know that he had that talent and kind of just has kept him along with that.
Well, with that sort of development on Fnatic, how much sort of interaction do you guys have with the actual main team? Am I right in thinking you're all actually in like the same house now, or like the same kind of office? Or something like that?
Not yet, but eventually we will be. For now, we don't have too much interaction with them. We can talk to them when we want to, and we're scrimming once in a while, but it's not too close yet, no.
Is that because of like the pandemic and everything that just making it really difficult? Yeah.
So is there do you know of any plans in particular once you guys are sort of all in the same location? Is there plans to do maybe more sort of scrims or just sort of one-to-one sessions or anything? Or is that just sort of maybe something to be arranged later?
Yeah, we'll just arrange it later. It all depends on how strong both teams are, how similar in level they are, and what we can gain from each other, all of this.
Fair enough. And how long then till you take Selfmade's place?
When he goes G2, I guess. I don't know.
We'll see. Cool. I think we're maybe at a point we could maybe start wrapping up then. Tom, have you got any other topics in mind, or?
No, it's been an absolute pleasure to kind of talking about, kind of Fnatic and everything. I do want to do what I do every time and just have a little bit of a chat about Dan and MagiFelix, because I feel like, while they are gone to greener pastures, they are still with us in heart in the NLC. Didn't go great for Dan. MagiFelix, I still feel like is, suffering a little bit sometimes, unfortunately, but not as positive as what it was last week, I would say, with the Dan and MagiFelix update. But keep them in our hearts as the NLC faithful.
What are your on maybe Dan in particular as a fellow jungler, Maxi? What are your thoughts on on sort of Dan's level? Because we saw a lot of and it was mainly people on Reddit and Twitter that I think literally never watched the NLC anyway. That when he got on XL's main roster, were basically saying it. Should have been this person, should have been that person. Dan's not good enough. Blah blah blah.
He played one season in Rift Rivals.
Yeah, one game in Rift Rivals wasn't good enough. How do you rate Dan? Were you sort of surprised at all to see him get that chance on an NEC team, or do you think he was sort of ready for that?
I think he was ready for it, honestly. In 2018, when I played for an IP, I didn't think he was very good at all. So when I went back to NLC and played against him, I didn't think he was very good, but he was a good jungler for sure. He definitely improved a lot these 2 years. So I think he was ready for NLC or for LEC, yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
And what do you think of kind of jungle in the LEC as a whole? Because it's like, I feel like, especially like this split, I feel like a lot more junglers are getting a lot more attention. I guess that's because of the meta of what it kind of is right now anyway. But like, there's a lot of obviously young crop of junglers which are constantly going through. Like, how good is it kind of to have that competitive pool for you right now?
Like player-wise, or
yeah, just player-wise, like, because I'm guessing like you play probably a lot of these players, even if it's in like solo queue and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But to have the quality of those players kind of around, how good is it for you as well?
I think the top 5 junglers in LEC are like a level ahead of everyone else, if not more. And then the bottom 5, they're really similar to the top ERL junglers, I think, in level. So you can swap around in a split or 2, like no one knows, right?
Keeps you on your toes, I'm guessing.
Yes, yeah.
Ready to nip the spot then, I suppose.
Yeah.
Presuming maybe it's self-made in the bottom 5 or the top 5? Or...
No. He's in the upper, of course.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, we can maybe start to wrap up then for this episode. As always, we are obviously hosted by the UKEL, so we can have a very quick check on what's been going on there. We did have the final games of this week happened earlier today, and here we go. We've got to look at the current table. We see Demise there. I think more or less locked in first place now. I think there's only 1 week left to play. So yeah, probably take a miracle for them not to go into playoffs with that top seed. And then followed by Viperio, Hive, and Nerd Rage. Nerd Rage, obviously, we see there though, level on wins with Lucendi at the moment. So still to play for in the last week. LDN and Mythos both with a chance of playoffs as well. And then Monster there, I think even themselves technically could make it too. So
the miracle run. Obviously, Monster, weren't doing very well for the entire split until last week occurred. Something clicked. The Monster miracle run begins.
Here we go. And we can see then where that miracle run will continue in the upcoming games as well. So starting on Thursday, 6 PM as usual. We've got Lucendi against LDN. Obviously, that's a massive one with the playoff race. Same as Monster against Nerd Rage. Following that, then we've got Mythos against Hive, and then lastly Demise against Viperio. Like I say, that will start at 6 PM GMT this Thursday. And with that, I think we're all good to wrap up. So thanks for coming on, Maxi. It's been good to have a chat, and good luck for playoffs. And for those that have been watching, if anyone's been watching live on the UKEL, you can of course follow on there to see us here, usually every Sunday, as well as obviously the UKEL matches. Otherwise, if you're watching back later on YouTube or listening on Spotify, you can follow there too. And if you're sort of watching on YouTube or Twitch, and you can obviously see our lovely faces, you'll also see our Twitters on the screen as well. So do feel free to follow us directly. And with that, I think we're all done. So that's it. Thanks for watching.